Axel Foley is back as Eddie Murphy brings us a brand new Beverly Hills Cop movie. This has been in the works for quite a while, and the new one is on Netflix. But in preparation, I watched the first three Beverly Hills Cop movies for the first time ever. So we're going to talk about all of them, specifically Axel F, but I think we'll dabble into the other ones as well. Let's talk Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my spoiler-free review for the new Beverly Hills Cop movie, Axel F. This is streaming now on Netflix. And boy, I mean, talk about a movie that people have been anticipating for a long, long time. This is one that I think it's kind of a shame they didn't release in theaters. Obviously, the first one was the biggest film hit of 1984, and everybody, of course, saw that in the theater, maybe after the fact on VHS or whatever, but, huge box office for that first one. The second one did very well as well in 1987. The third one, not so much, and not very well received by critics or fans alike either. But this one been in the works for quite a while. I mean, they first started talking about a fourth version of Beverly Hills Cop in the early 2000s. At one point, CBS was maybe going to do it as a TV show featuring the son of Axel Foley, and maybe Eddie Murphy was going to be in like the first episode or something like that. There's been a lot of things with that, but this one finally coming out, and the results are for the most part pretty good. So we're going to get into all of this here momentarily. First though, let me welcome you into Dan Reviews It. Thank you for finding this video. We do movie and TV reviews here on the channel, and just about every day I post something new, so there's always a lot to check out. With that in mind, please consider subscribing, click that like button, comment below. All of that of course helps the channel out, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this movie. Axel F, like I said, people have been anticipating this. I had seen bits and pieces of the first Beverly Hills Cop over the years. I was a bit young when it first came out. I would have been 7, I guess. I saw it, kind of on TV a little bit later, but we didn't have cable, so I didn't really get to see it on the movie channels and all that stuff. So I've never sat down and watched the whole thing until the other day. So, and that's the same for the second and the third one. I said, you know what, if we're going to do this fourth one, let's do it right and watch all of them. So I definitely want to hear from you in the comments about this particular iteration, or any of the other ones as well, because I think we are going to dive in a little bit to some of the other ones. I thought about doing my own review for all three of those and then the new one, but we'll all just kind of blend them together. So the premise for this new one, so we have, of course, Eddie Murphy back as Axel Foley, and other returning people from the franchise include Judge Reinhold, Paul Reiser, Bronson Pinchot, and John Ashton. Of course, some of the people in those other movies have passed, including Gilbert Gottfried. But we have some new members of the cast as well, including Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Taylor Page, and Kevin Bacon in some new roles. So the basic premise here of the fourth one is that Axel has returned to Beverly Hills after his daughter's Jane's life is threatened. And so she and Axel end up teaming up with her ex-boyfriend, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and some of his old pals to uncover a conspiracy. All right, let's talk, I guess, about this franchise as a whole. So I watched that first one, and oh my God, it was amazing. Like, I can see why it was such a huge hit back in the day. But not only that, this was Eddie Murphy really just starting to peak. I wouldn't say it was at his peak, because I think he was still very much on the rise, but he had done Saturday Night Live, he did the 48 Hours movie. So that first one came out and just blew everybody away. It made him, really overnight, a bona fide movie star of the highest degree. It's hard to overestimate, in the mid to late 80s, how enormous Eddie Murphy was. Coming to America, now that was one I watched all the time as a kid. One of my favorite movies, really, of all time. Certainly in the comedy category, it's up there for me. And that was, I would say, probably the peak of Eddie Murphy. The first Beverly Hills Cop, he was on the rise, and then by the second one, a few years later, and Coming to America the year after, he was just, peak Murphy. So I can see why that resonated with so many people. For me, I just can't imagine a better action comedy team up, certainly for that time period. I think it's better than Lethal Weapon and a lot of the ones that came out at that time. And I can't believe that they wanted Sylvester Stallone to originally do the role. I just can't imagine. It would have been such a different movie if that were the case. Eddie Murphy obviously brought his comedic chops to it and his improvisational skills as well. And the action is really great. It holds up. And it reminds me of, just how they did things in the 80s. Not a lot of CGI, if you wanted to do a street chase where you're wrecking a bunch of cars and all that stuff, you just did it. And you filmed it and it looked awesome, right? And so that movie starts out with The Heat Is On, Glenn Frey, kicking with the soundtrack, which they nod to in this one, Axel F. The first scene, same thing. We're listening to a retro 80s station or whatever, and they play The Heat Is On, and there's a fun action sequence to that in the beginning. So I loved that first movie. The second movie, I thought a little less so, because I think they took what worked about the first movie. They tried to kind of recreate it like a lot of sequels do, certainly in the comedy and action realm. And it worked fine, but, is it up to par with that original? No. But again, we have an awesome intro with the Bob Seger shakedown, great action sequence there. And they do that in Axel F as well. We have the first scene with The Heat Is On, and then I think maybe there's one scene of dialogue, and then Bob Seger shakedown. We have another action sequence. So really bringing it back with that. And then the third one, well, not very good. In fact, it's bad. And I think part of the reason was Eddie Murphy at that point was trying to focus less on his comedy career and being taken more seriously as a dramatic actor. And so they really lean in heavily on the action with that and not so much the comedy, and it gets a little bit corny in a lot of places. And even the opening number, and I love NXS. It's some NXS song I wasn't even familiar with. And I love NXS. Really, they're one of my favorite, 80s bands. But boy, oh boy, what a bad opening song for a Beverly Hills Cop movie. So they wisely, did not put that one in Axel F. But look, grade-wise, it's definitely descending 1, 2, and 3. I think 1 is an A. I mean, it is really, I think it holds its place in the top, comedy films of the 80s or whatever. The second one, it's like a B or a B minus. I think I settled on a B minus for it. And then the third one is a D plus. I mean, the third one is just not very good. So I think all people expected from Axel F is please let it be better than the third one. And that would, I think, satisfy a lot of people. But it goes a little beyond that. For me, this one is as good as number 2. Because I think what it does wisely is really has a lot of the retro feel to it. It feels like a Beverly Hills Cop movie. And it also feels like an Eddie Murphy movie, which, look, I've always been a fan of Eddie Murphy, even through his terrible movies. I always liked him as a person, and certainly Dreamgirls cemented that for me. Talk about his great dramatic range, and he was nominated for an Oscar for that. But, in the midst of all of these other sort of fart humor movies like The Clumps and the Norbit movie and all of that kind of thing. But the last 10 years or so, I think he's really made some interesting choices, including, Dolomite Is My Name. He could have been nominated for that, certainly. And that was a Netflix movie as well, so he's already got that Netflix connection. But with this, they really, I think, went above and beyond what they needed to do. I think people would have been happy if this was just better than the third. But I think they do more than that. First of all, I like the plot. The plots of all three of those first movies are never really, that meaningful. Yeah, something's going on. Axel's got to figure it out. He riffs and all of that, and there's some fun action sequences. That's it. Nobody really remembers the Beverly Hills Cop movies for their major plot points, right? You remember the humor, you remember the different big action set pieces and the sequences, and the music, of course, which is on full display here as well. All of that is on full display. And it's nice to see Joseph Gordon-Levitt because I think he plays very well off of Murphy here. And also, he plays pretty well off of the daughter. I'm not super familiar with her. She looked familiar to me. Taylor Page is her name. Has she been in anything I've seen? White Boy Rick, I did see that. That was with Matthew McConaughey, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I saw that. All right, so I've seen her in a couple of things over the years, but nothing that she was like the star of. But her chemistry with Axel is great, and obviously there's like an estranged father and daughter thing there. And something else I really liked that they went back to here that they kind of focused on in those first three movies is that there's no real heavy romance. One thing about '80s movies and action hero movies, I guess, in some instances, is there's always that like, oh, I got to do it for this woman, and there's a big, emotional love sequence towards the end. The Beverly Hills Cop movies never really focused on that, and as a result, they don't go to that well here either. It's more of, at least the emotional impact is more about the father and the daughter, and them being estranged, and we have a couple of scenes with that. Nothing too heavy, but I think it worked for what it was. And then you've got Kevin Bacon in this, who is just having a blast. I couldn't remember if Kevin Bacon and Murphy ever worked together. I decided that they had not, but I didn't look that up. So maybe they have. Of course, the famous Kevin Bacon game. He's worked with everybody in Hollywood. You can get to him within 6 degrees. And I just can't think of any movie that Kevin Bacon and Eddie Murphy were in together. But I haven't seen all the Eddie Murphy movies, so maybe there's one, I'm missing. Maybe he was in, Pluto Nash or something. But in any event, I think he's great here. He's clearly having fun with this villainous role, and he's a lot of fun to watch on screen. So look, overall for this new one, Axel F, I think it did exactly what it should have done, and more than it needed to. If the bar is let's be better than number 3, that was going to be a pretty easy bar to clear, but they went a little bit above that and said, no, let's make this, really, really stand out, and maybe be kind of, okay, maybe you're the 3rd best movie in the franchise, but like maybe right underneath 2. And for me, that's where it is. I think this and number 2 are kind of neck and neck. And I think this was the right time for it. I think if it came out 20 years ago, like they initially were talking about, I don't think it would have had that retro charm. Everybody is wanting something from their childhood right now. That you had the Bratz movie about the Brat Pack, and all the '80s and '90s nostalgia is really, really hot right now. And so I think, even though it's a while between the 3rd and 4th installment, 30 years is a long time to go between films in a franchise, but you know what? It works. And look, it worked for Top Gun a couple of summers ago as well, which Jerry Bruckheimer, I think, was also involved in, and he's one of the producers for this. So overall, I think this is a very enjoyable movie. I wish it was playing in theaters. I think this would have been fun to see with a, big group of people hooting and hollering at all of the fun antics and whatnot. But this, for me, is more than just serviceable. I think this is actually a decent action comedy film, and I think a great return to form for this series. I leave Beverly Hills Cop Axel F with a B-. And again, this and 2 are kind of on the same level for me. And you can check this out on Netflix. All right, thank you so much for watching. Dan Reviews It. I'll see you next time.